Welcome back to my YouTube channel all about VLSI. In this video, we are going to start a new topic which is known as UVM Config Database. So what is meant by this UVM Config Database? So basically in UVM, we often need to pass configuration information like addresses or timeouts or other setup values from higher level components like the test or environment to the down level components like drivers or monitors or agents. So let us consider a scenario where we have a requirement, like let's say suppose if we have a top module like this top module is having your test, and this test it is going to contain environment, and it is going to contain your driver. Okay, so this top module should pass virtual interface handle to our driver. Okay, so this top module is going to pass the virtual interface handle to our driver. So in the case of SV, what we have learned is using the keyword new, we were passing this virtual interface handle. Okay, but in the case of UVM, we are not going to use our new operator. We are going to use UVM config DB. Okay, so using this UVM config DB, we are going to pass this argument virtual interface handle to our driver. Okay, so this is how we are going to pass our uh, instances or any handles you say or any data items from the top to bottom hierarchy. Okay, so using this UVM config database, we are going to pass this handles and data items. So for doing this in a flexible and scalable way, UVM provides internal configuration database known as UVM config DB. Basically, this UVM config DB, it is a class, it is like a database. So it is going to store the values, and the top level components who wants to send the components, who wants to send the data or transaction handles to the lower level components, it is just going to store the data into the database, and the lower level components will retrieve the data from the database. Okay, so the database will allow us to store the values, and if we want to store any value, like let's say suppose if I want to store any int value. Okay, let's say suppose if I want to store any int value 50, then with this 50 there will be a key associated with it. Okay, if I want to store a virtual interface handle VIF, let's say if I want to store a virtual interface handle VIF inside a database, then there will be a key associated with this virtual interface. Okay, so every data item or any transaction item, if you want to store it in the database, so there will be a corresponding key associated with that particular variable or the transaction handle. Okay, and so whoever or whichever component retrieving this data item should also provide the same key for retrieving the data. Okay, so the sender should use the same key as well as the retriever should also use the same key, so that only they can access the data. So how does UVM config DB works? So all the methods in UVM config DB are static, and we are going to use scope resolution operator for accessing them. So what are the methods? What are the common methods which are present in UVM config DB is set method, get method, exist method, and unset method. So we have set, get, exist, and unset. So let's say suppose in our previous example which we are seeing, so in our previous example where inside our top, so top was using UVM config DB for setting the virtual interface, for sending the virtual interface to the driver. So how it is sending the virtual interface to the driver? It is using this set method. It is using the set method which is of UVM config type. So this set method is present in your UVM config DB class. So how we are going to access the set method? Using your scope resolution operator set. So this is how we are going to access the method. And how, what is this get method? So here our driver wants to receive the interface handle. So how it is going to receive? It is going to use this get method for receiving the interface handle. Okay, so this is the set methods. So basically set method it is going to use for sending the transaction item or data item, and get method it is going to receive the data or transaction item or any interface instance like that. Okay, now next method is exist. So this exist method is going to check if a value is existing for a given key or not. Okay, and coming to unset, it is going to remove a value from the config db. So these are the methods which are available in the UVM config db class. Now, so let us see the syntax for this set and get. So let's say in our previous example where the top module was sending the data, where the top module was sending the interface instance. Okay. So how it is going to send the interface instance? First, it should store the data inside the database, or first it should store this particular interface instance inside the database. So how it is going to store? So it is going to use this UVM config DB, which is a class, and this is a parameterized class, and this is a parameterized class. In this particular example where the top module was sending the interface, we are going to mention the type parameter as interface name. Okay. If the top is sending some integer data, we are going to mention the parameter type as integer. Okay. And followed by scope resolution operator set. So we have basically four arguments: one, two, three, four. Both set and get method will have the same arguments. So set method is having this path, field name, value. Get method is also having set this path, field name, and variable. Okay. So let us see what is this. So basically this refers to the current component handle. So basically this refers to the uh, entry point at the database. Okay, basically this refers to the current entry point at the database, like which component is accessing the database, which hierarchy, in which hierarchy, which component hierarchy. So which component in the hierarchy is accessing the database, at which stage and which component is accessing the hierarchy. Okay. And coming to next is path. So using this path, we are going to specify which component can access this particular data. Okay. So using this path, we are going to specify which and all components can access the data which the top is sending, or which the top level component is sending. Okay. And followed by field name. This is your key. And this is the actual value which you are going to send. Okay. So this is how we are going to send the data. Now, what is get? So get method is going to get the data. Now what is this? So this is nothing but your component. So which component is which component is using this get data? That is which component is accessing the database. Okay. And path is nothing but this is empty break. Generally we will use empty string. That is only this component is going to get the data. Okay. So here no need to mention any path. So while we are using this get method, we will just simply leave it blank. Okay. Followed by, we should mention the same key. Here also we should mention the same key and the variable for storing the value which the set component is sending. Okay. So this is how we are going to send and receive the data. Okay. In more detail we will discuss in our upcoming slides. Yes. So let us try to understand how this UVM config DB set is working. So the set method is used to place the configuration values like integers, virtual interfaces, etc. Okay, into the UVM configuration database. So they can be retrieved later by components using get. Okay, that we have seen already. So this set method has four variables also we have seen. One is context and another is instance name followed by field name and value. Okay. So let us try to understand what is this context everything. So UVM config DB hash. Let's say this test module is sending some int data type. Okay. Int scope resolution operator set. The first argument is context. Okay. So what do you mean by context? Context is component from where the hierarchy begins. If null, path starts from top. If this path is related to the current component. Okay. So this context is nothing but your hierarchical starting point for accessing the database entry. Okay. So using this context, we are basically mentioning. So this context is nothing but the hierarchical starting point for accessible database entry. So using this first argument, we are mentioning what is the which component is accessing the database. Okay. Using the first argument, we are mentioning which component is uh, uh, accessing the database. Okay. So I will write down again here. So UVM config db, let's say we are sending an int data type. So first one is context. So using this argument, we are going to mention which component is accessing the database, and followed by instance name. So the instance name is hierarchical path that limits the database entry accessibility. So using this instance, we are going to tell which and all components can access the data which we are sending. Okay, so using this path, we are going to mention. Next, followed by the field name, that is our key, and followed by the value, the original value which we want to set. Here, there is one more important point to be understood. So let's say if I'm using, let's say this is my top module, and inside my top module I'm having my test, and inside this test I'm going to have environment driver. Okay, so this is the path hierarchy I'm having. Okay, now let's say if the interface handle is present here. Okay, so how I am going to write down UVM underscore config underscore DB hash interface name, interface type, followed by set. Now, so the first argument of your set should be always a UVM component type. Okay, so the first component should be an UVM component type. Since top module is not a UVM component, inside your top module, if you remember in our previous lectures, what we have done, we have simply made run underscore test. So we are calling this run underscore test. And if you remember why this run underscore test is used, so this run underscore test, if we call this particular method, then only all the components will be created. So here top is not a module, here top is not a component. Okay, so that's why what we are going to do here is we are going to mention null. Okay, so here whenever we are using our UVM config DB inside our top, we are going to use null as the argument. Okay, and whenever you are using UVM config DB for setting any data or for entering any data into the database, then you should always use this keyword. Like let's say suppose if I am using this UVM config DB inside my test component, then what I'm going to do, I'm going to write UVM underscore config underscore DB hash, let's say some int value I'm sending, set. Here I'm going to mention this. Okay, so whenever you are using this UVM config DB in the case of components, you are going to use this, and whenever you are using UVM config DB inside your top module, system verilog module, then you are going to use the first keyword as null. Okay, now so let's say our requirement is only this driver should get the data which we are sending into the database. Okay, only this driver should retrieve the data from the database which we are setting into the database. Okay, so in the first case, what we are going to mention is we are going to simply write environment dot driver. So this is the path we can mention. Okay, let's say so this is how we are going to mention. So in this case, what will happen, only the driver can receive the data, no other component can receive the data. Or else, let's say suppose if we want all the components under this test, under this environment should receive the data. So what I'm going to write is environment dot star. Okay, so environment will not receive any data, environment cannot receive any data from the database, but the components which are under the environment can receive all the data items. Okay, so this is how I can restrict the access to the database by mentioning the path here. Okay, so in detail we will discuss further in our further discussions. Okay, yes. Next, coming to UVM config DB get. So in UVM config DB, it's a mechanism used to pass the configuration data that and all we have seen. So the get function is used to retrieve such configuration data from the database. Okay. So how we are going to get the data? So UVM config DB. Let's say we are receiving an int followed by get. Now here what we will mention here, we should always mention the first argument is this. Okay, so this refers to the current component object. Okay, and followed by the path. There is no need to mention any path because we are receiving the data, right? So there is no need to mention any path. Okay, and followed by the string key value, and followed by the variable you want to store that particular value. Okay, so this is how we are going to use this get method, UVM config get method. So this is how we are going to use set and get methods in UVM config DB, and we are going to send the data and receive the data. So this will be more clear when we see one example. So with an example we will try to understand this particular concept. Now let us try to understand this with an example. So let's say we have uh, a test, and inside this test, let's say we have an environment, and inside this environment, let's say we have two classes, class A and class B. So this is our hierarchy. So we have our test environment, class A and class B. Now this class is going to have one more class C. Okay, subclass. It is going to have a subclass which is known as C. Okay, so this subclass C will be created on basis of one signal. So let's say, so this subclass C will be created on one basis. Let's say that signal will be CTRL, that is control. So if this control is equal to 1, then class C will be created. This is our requirement. If control is equal to 1, class C is created, and if control is equal to 0, then class C is not created. Then class C is not created. So this is our requirement. Okay, so if control is equal to 1, class C is created, and if control is equal to 0, class C is not created. Now, and where is this control we are getting from, and how is this class B it is getting this control signal? This class B is getting this control signal from the top model, which is known as test. So the test, it is giving this control signal to the class B. So it is giving it to the class B via the UVM config DB. So this control signal CTRL is given to the class B via the test using this configuration DB. So this UVM configuration DB, this control signal is given. If this control signal is 1, which is made by the test, then this class B will create this class C, or else it is not going to create this class C. So this is how we are going to do the coding, and we are going to check this requirement. So let us try to fulfill this requirement using our EDA tool. Let us see with this requirement with the coding. So first of all, let me create my libraries. Take include UVM underscore macros dot svh and import UVM underscore package. Now here let me create a class which is known as class A, or you can say component A. Okay, so I am creating this class A as component A. Okay, so class component A, or let's say it is class A. Okay, so in the diagram we have written class A, right? So let me create a class which is known as class A. So class underscore A, which is extending from UVM component, and let me register this class. Take UVM component utils class A. Okay, now within a function new, string name is equal to class A and UVM component parent. So super dot new of name comma parent, followed by end function. So this is my class A, and let me display use one more function which is known as display. So this display function, what it is going to do is, it is going to display UVM underscore info get underscore type underscore name inside class A, and verbosity level UVM low. So this is what I have created, followed by end function and followed by end class. Now let me copy the same code and let me create the class B also. So this is my class B, which is extending from UVM component, and the name is class B UVM component parent. Let me display it inside class B. Okay, now inside your class B build phase we are going to uh, create our class C. So let me declare a variable which is known as control. So let me declare a function void build phase UVM phase super dot build phase. Okay, now here I am going to get my UVM configuration DB. I am going to get my config DB from my test. So how I am going to get my DB configuration? So I am going to use tick. So I am going to use UVM underscore config underscore DB, and the parameter is int scope resolution operator get. Now, so from where we are accessing this config DB? From this class underscore B. So I'm going to use this is the first argument, and since this is the receiver side, we don't need any path required here. And third argument is the key. Okay, the key should be same in the sender side and the receiver side. So the key is control. Okay, in the center side also I will use the same key, and I will store it in a variable which is known as CTRL. So the variable where you want to store, that variable I am passing here. Okay, and I will use it in if loop. So if this is not getting, if I am not able to get this configuration, then I am going to use my fatal. Then I am going to use this fatal tick UVM fatal get type underscore name get function fail followed by UVM underscore none. So this is what I am using, and yeah. So afterwards, if CTRL is given, if CTRL is equal to 1, then I am going to create my class C handle. Then I am going to create my class C instance. Okay. So first of all, let me declare the class C. Then I will declare it. So class underscore C and CC. Okay. So I'm going to create it. CC is equal to class underscore C type ID create CC comma this. So I have created this. Okay, and followed by I am going to call my CC function, display function, CC dot display followed by end function and end class. And let me declare the class C function also. So it is class C, which is extending from UVM component class C. Okay, so I have declared my class C function, class B function, and class A. Okay, and inside this, let me add the display function also. Function void display. Inside my class B, I am adding my display function also. Take UVM info get type name inside class B and verbosity UVM none. So this is my info function and followed by end function. So let me create my environment. So I've created class A, and I also created class B, and I've also created class C, and I've also created class B. So basically in class B, I have declared a variable which is known as CTRL, which value the value of CTRL I am getting it from the test component. So this value of CTRL I'm going to get it with the help of this configuration DB. So what I'm using UVM config DB, and the argument is int, and using this get operator I'm going to get this. And if I'm getting this ctrl is equal to 1, then I'm going to make the create the instance of the class C. Then I'm going to create the instance of the class C. Okay, now let me create the environment, class environment, which is extending from UVM environment. So this function is not needed, display function. So within a build phase of environment, function void build phase UVM phase super dot build phase. So I'm going to create my instances for class A and class B. So let me first of all declare them. Let me declare the handles for them. Class underscore A CA, class underscore B CB. So let me create them. CA is equal to class underscore A type ID create CA comma this, and CB is equal to class underscore B type ID create CB comma this. So I have created my instances of CA and CB. Now what I am going to do, and followed by end function and end class. Now let me write down the test class test, which is extending from UVM test. So in the build phase of test, UVM phase. So in the build phase of test, we are going to send that. First of all, let us create. So in the build phase of test, we are going to create the environment instance. Let me create the environment handle, and let me create the environment instance super dot build phase and envh environment type ID create envh comma this. So I've created my environment instance. Now, so using config DB, UVM config DB. Now, who is accessing, from where we are accessing this config DB? We are accessing it from the test. So I'm writing this followed by the path I'm going to mention. Okay. So let us use star. That means every instance can able to see this variable which we are setting. So every component can see the variable which we are setting, and followed by the key name which is control, and followed by the variable which you are setting, that is ctrl. Okay, so let me declare that ctrl also here. Int ctrl is equal to 1, and followed by end function and end class. And let me declare one more task which is known as run phase. Task run phase UVM phase super dot run phase. Here I'm going to call my display function of class A and class B. So class A function, yeah, and class B function also, envh dot cb dot display end task. So let me create a module now. So let me create a module top, then an initial beginning block. Let me run this. So my test name is test only. Yes, so I'm running this. Let me check whether I have made any mistakes. Yeah, let me save this and run this. Yes, so at the output we can see class C instance has been created, and we can see we are getting a display statement which is known as inside class C. Now let us try to restrict the access to class C by changing the path in the set method. So let us change the path in the set method. Let us say it is only simply environment envh. Okay, so let's save this and run this. Let's see whether it is working or not. So fatal message we are getting, UVM test top class B getting failed. Okay, so get function failed, we are getting this. So since it is not able to receive the config db, it is not able to get it, so it is getting fail message. And in class B also, while we are writing the fatal message, there is no third argument. For fatal there will be no argument, third argument. Okay, yes. And here let us try to give one more path, environment dot star, that is below the environment every component can see and get the config db. So let us try, let us see whether now the class B can able to get the config or not. Yes, now we are not getting any fatal message, and here we are getting the display statement as class C, so displaying from the class C. So this is the display statement which we are getting. Okay, so by specifying the path we can restrict the access whether the component can get the can able to get the data from the config db or not. So yeah, so that's about your, so that's about UVM config db introduction. So if you like this video, please like, share and subscribe to my YouTube channel all about VLSI. Thank you for watching this video.